Hey guys, this is Undercover Dudes all the way from Down Under, and today we're going to be talking about the death of Combat Arms: The Line of Sight. Basically, Nexon Europe yesterday went and pulled the plug. They went and announced that Combat Arms: The Line of Sight is not going to be published under the Nexon Europe name. Now, I have to go and say this because a lot of people will go and get the wrong idea. This does not mean that Line of Sight as a game is going to be scrapped. This doesn't mean that nobody's going to go and be able to play Line of Sight in the future. All it means is that Nexon Europe is not going and publishing this game. This means that another company, another external company that, I don't know, Arena Games or whatever, they can go and pick up Line of Sight as a first-person shooter that they want to go and publish, and they can go and publish it under whatever the name they want. It probably will be Line of Sight in the end, but they can go and publish it under whatever name they want. And that can be seen in many other regions right now. Level Up Games in Brazil are publishing Line of Sight as Line of Sight in Brazil. And there is another company in Indonesia, I believe. They are called Playpark, and they're publishing Line of Sight as well under the name Line of Sight. So that basically means that in the future, near or far or whatever, there is a probably quite a large probability that we are going to go and play Line of Sight. But it's going to be published by another company, not by Nexon, by someone else. And that means it may have a North American release, it may have a European release, we don't know. The game is very much in limbo for a lot of the Western players that were potentially going to go and play the game. Okay, let me restate this one last time. Line of Sight is not a game that will be scrapped. It will hopefully in the future, there is a very high probability in the future, another company will go and pick up the game and publish it for North American and European players. Okay, so let's put all of that behind us and let's go and talk about the core commentary topic, the core topic, why Combat Arms: The Line of Sight was dropped. And I'm looking at the page right now, I'll link in the description below, the Combat Arms: The Line of Sight page, and it basically goes and says that the reason why Combat Arms: The Line of Sight was dropped by Nexon Europe was it was such a departure from the Combat Arms series. Combat Arms and Combat Arms: The Line of Sight were really only related in name. Gameplay-wise, they were very, very different in terms of the mechanics. Combat Arms felt like Combat Arms, while Line of Sight felt like Call of Duty. The only similarities were in the weapons, the M4s, the G36s, the L9s, whatever. The modes, Elimination, One-Man Army, Elimination Pro, Search and Destroy, blah, 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 blah. And then some of the characters had very, Combat Arms-y feel type of stuff. But overall, Combat Arms: Line of Sight was a very, very different game to original Combat Arms. And Nexon really said that that was the core issue. The core issue was that it didn't seem like a sequel, rather it seemed like a completely different name with the Combat Arms name, the Combat Arms franchise name, just tacked on the front simply because they wanted people to go and play it. And Nexon Europe went and made a very, very big decision and canned the game, as I said before. Because of that reason, they said they gathered feedback from passionate gamers and said, while analyzing the results, we realized that the direction taken by Line of Sight did not really fit our vision and focus for the Combat Arms brand identity. So basically what I explained before. And so what they're going to be doing now, if you guys are wondering, is they are going to be putting all of their effort into Combat Arms. All of their effort into Combat Arms. And I'm going to be talking about that separately in another commentary, probably another 15-20 minute commentary about that, because that is a very, very, very ballsy choice. Because Combat Arms, it's a very, very old game, and it needs some stuff done in order to go and bring it up to 2016. But I'll talk about that in a future video. Okay, so let's go back to Combat Arms: The Line of Sight. And this game, when I played it about a year ago, actually, about a year ago is when it went into first beta. It doesn't feel like a year ago. It feels very, very much shorter than that. But it went into first beta about a year ago, and I thought it was a pretty decent game. I really thought it was a game that could go and succeed. And there's quite a few reasons why. The first reason why is because a lot of people like Call of Duty, right? Call of Duty is a franchise that is loved by many, many people. Now, I know with the whole Infinite Warfare thing and blah, 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 but this would have actually benefited Combat Arms Line of Sight in many, many ways. A lot of people just want a free-to-play Call of Duty to go and play. There is no game out there, in my opinion, that can go and replicate the Call of Duty experience in a free-to-play form. Combat Arms Line of Sight was a game that did have a very, very good Call of Duty-like feel. The game was running gun, it was fast-paced, it was quite a fun experience, and in my time of playing it, I did enjoy the game. Now, do I have a bit of a bias because the fact that it said Combat Arms Line of Sight, and the fact I've been playing Combat Arms for 5-6 years? Yeah, probably a bit of bias. Looking back, the game wasn't really all that good, but as a free-to-play title, it went and held its own, and I think that if the game got released in a different marketing angle, it would have got a lot more popularity, because when Combat Arms Line of Sight was initially announced, everybody, and I mean everybody, went and fought Combat Arms 2. That was what Line of Sight was going to be. It was going to be a direct sequel to the original Combat Arms. It was going to be Combat Arms, but with better graphics, better gameplay, better maps, better modes, better guns, better customization, better everything. It was just going to be Combat Arms 2.0. I even made a video, and it was called Combat Arms 2.0 Line of Sight, or something like that. Even I thought it was going to be the revamped version of Combat Arms. But when everybody went and hopped into the game for the beta, when everybody hopped in, we realized very, very quickly that it wasn't Combat Arms 2.0. It was more Call of Duty than Combat Arms. And that isn't a bad thing. That isn't a bad thing by any stretch of the phrase that I just said. But everybody was hopping in expecting Combat Arms, and we were playing Line of Sight like Combat Arms. We were playing it with this really, really fast pace, go and rush, try to kill as much people as possible. And that can work, but when you go and incorporate the movement speed that was significantly lower than the original Combat Arms, the superpowers, the very, very weird field of view, in my opinion, that definitely didn't fit for a first-person shooter game on the PC. Overall, the feeling of Combat Arms Line of Sight and the gameplay of Combat Arms Line of Sight was not a Combat Arms 2.0 game. And then, everybody just kind of thought, okay, because we were expecting so much. We were expecting so much. But then we got not so much. And this is not taking a dig at Blackspot, who are the developers of Line of Sight. This is not taking a dig at them. This is taking a bit of a criticism at the marketing angle taken by Nexon Europe. Because I guarantee that if Combat Arms Line of Sight was gone and announced as simply Line of Sight, a lot of people would have been okay with it. It felt like a free-to-play Call of Duty, and people would have gone into the game thinking, okay, a free-to-play Call of Duty. They would have been very, very receptive to the superpowers. They were a bit clunky and overpowered, but overall, they were a pretty okay mechanic, even though I turned them off in most of my games. I personally didn't like them, but I could see a lot of people liking them. The maps were cool, the gameplay was cool, the FOV I had a problem with, but whatever. But overall, if the game was announced as simply Line of Sight, nobody would have made the connection between the two games, besides from the accolades, but it would have probably changed the accolades, besides from the mode names, but they would have changed the mode games. If there was no relation between the two games, would I guarantee it? No, I wouldn't guarantee that the game would be published, but I'd say it would have a much higher probability of the game being published. The reason being is because it wouldn't have had that criticism. It wouldn't have had that criticism that, oh, okay, this isn't Combat Arms 2. It would have just been, okay, this is a free-to-play Call of Duty that it's a pretty fun game. Okay, that's cool, we'll go and play it. Let me go and explain it like this. Everybody had such high expectations for Combat Arms Line of Sight. And then when we went into it, we got an experience that was less than what we expected. But saying that, was the experience bad? No, but it was less than what we expected, and therefore it fell flat. It's like going from a really high thing to a slightly lower thing that's still pretty decent. That means it's a failure. This drop means it's a failure. If our expectations are low and then it goes high, that means the game is a big success. This is completely the same as Tom Clancy's The Division. Tom Clancy's The Division had so much hype. This game was hyped to no end. The expectation was a 10 out of 10 blockbuster shooter. And then, what did we get? We got, I'd say, a 7 out of 10. But the drop was too much, and people were disappointed with the game, and that's why it fell flat. And that's why people are not playing the game anymore, because they had such a high expectation, and the game was less than what their expectations were, and therefore they're not playing it, even though the game is still pretty good in my opinion. Then you have a look in comparison. If the game was announced as The Division, no Tom Clancy, people would have had a pretty mediocre expectation. And then on release, you would have gone and got that 7 out of 10. The fact that people were expecting a 4 out of 10, and then it went up to a 7 out of 10, people were like, damn, this game's pretty fun, and then would have continued playing it. It's such a stupid thing, but it happens to every single game franchise out there that has a bit of popularity behind it, or even doesn't have any popularity behind it. But saying that. That is a really good example, in my opinion. I just thought that one up. And that is one reason why I believe Nexon Europe went and canned Line of Sight. Okay, so let's go to the real business reason why Combat Arms Line of Sight was canned. Basically, Nexon Europe and Nexon America plan to combine their game and platform services and align its game portfolio to better position for continued growth across the Western market. Basically, they were trimming the fat. They were going and getting rid of games that really didn't make sense to be on Nexon's portfolio. And Combat Arms Line of Sight didn't make sense to be on Nexon's portfolio for many reasons. With Nexon Europe and Nexon America going and basically merging together as one company, even though they're going to be working separately on some stuff and whatever, but basically they're going to be merging in a lot of aspects. You look at the shooters. Look at the shooters they've got right now. You've got Combat Arms. You have First Assault, Ghost in the Shell First Assault. You've got the new game from Cliffy B, Lawbreakers, and that game looks absolutely fucking fantastic, by the way. You've got Warrock, and yeah, that's 4 shooters. You don't need a 5th shooter in Combat Arms Line of Sight. That is completely redundant. Reason being, well, let's have a look at the 5 first-person shooters individually, starting off with First Assault. Now, First Assault is basically Crossfire 2.0, but you can hop on with your mates for like 10 to 15 minutes and have a good shoot around. In case your mate doesn't have Counter-Strike Global Offensive, there you go. You can go and play First Assault. It's a fun game. I really enjoy playing it. Then you go and have a look at Combat Arms. That's feature packed. It has a ton of maps, a ton of modes, a ton of guns that First Assault really doesn't have, in my opinion. First Assault doesn't have a lot of content behind it, but Combat Arms damn does. If you want to go and play a game that has a lot of longevity to it, you want to go and try out all the different weapons, you want to try out all the different maps and modes or whatever, go and play Combat Arms. It's a pretty decent shooter, in my opinion, after they made all the fixes. Then you have Cliffy B's Lawbreakers. That game is a AAA gem. It is a fantastic game. It's an arena shooter with its roots in Unreal and Quake, and it is updated for 2016, and I believe it's going to be a really big success. And then we move over to Warrock. Only reason why this game still exists is because people are still playing and putting money into it. The game is outdated in every single aspect, and personally, it just isn't an enjoyable first-person shooter. I don't know why people are still playing it, but people are still playing it. That's the only reason why the game still is running. But the one game that doesn't go and fit in was Combat Arms Line of Sight. Where does Combat Arms Line of Sight go and fit in? There is no purpose for this game to be with Nexon. There is no purpose at all, because you've got First Assault, you've got Combat Arms, you've got Lawbreakers, you've got Warrock, you've got 4 first-person shooters. Who needs a 5th? Even if the game was quite fun to play, it didn't have its identity. It didn't have its identity in comparison to these other 5 shooters. And if it was, okay, European exclusive, and the fact that it was only really fighting against, Combat Arms Original and Warrock and maybe a little bit of First Assault, then yeah, Line of Sight would have been an okay choice. But the fact that the game services have been merged together, gives so many reasons to why this game was dropped. It didn't make sense. They were putting money into a game that didn't need to have money put into it. It's really, really simple. Combat Arms Line of Sight was so similar to Combat Arms and First Assault in the whole run around and shoot people kind of genre, even though the gameplay was quite different. The whole general aspect of run around and shoot people is what all three of these games have in common. First Assault is basically the most different from the original Combat Arms, while Combat Arms Line of Sight is basically in the middle, per se, with the whole superpowers and whatnot. So, you have three games. You would have three games competing against each other. It makes absolutely no sense, because you don't want games in your resume of video games or whatever to be competing against each other. You want to be competing against all the opposition out there from other companies. So it makes really no sense to why Combat Arms Line of Sight would have been published. And the fact that they got rid of it, it makes quite a lot of sense. And I predicted that Line of Sight was going to go and get dropped. I'd say back in October last year, September last year, I'm thinking, okay, this game's really going to go and get dropped. I didn't want to go and publish my theory publicly, because if it did get published, that would have been pretty bad of me. But, like, I don't think there was a point to having Combat Arms Line of Sight, but Combat Arms Line of Sight was a really fun game. And if another publisher goes and picks it up, that would be absolutely fantastic. And hopefully another publisher does go and pick it up, because it is a truly fun game. And I'm clocking in at basically 20 minutes right here. I know not many people are going to be here to the end, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this. But other than that, it's Undercover Dudes all the way from Down Under, out.